Oh, Latin 2. I promised that it would not be very long, and in fact, it has only been a single day since I uploaded the video on result clauses. Now, it may be another day or two before I actually upload this, but it's coming quickly enough. So, our second to last subordinate clause that we're going to learn about in Latin 2 is the indirect command. All right, now the indirect command is another type of reported speech. Let's go ahead and scroll out so you can see, bam, reported speech. It's another kind of reported speech, like the indirect statement or the indirect question. In fact, pretty much everything in grammar that has an indirect on it, unless it's like an actual noun, like an indirect object, they're all kinds of reported speech. And I'm sure that you're thinking like, why other forms of reported speech? Well, there's other forms of speech, and any form of speech you can also report, right? You know, I could say, hey, put on your shoes. That's a command. And I have, in my classroom, I've had to tell people to put on their shoes, which I think is weird. But anyway, let's not get distracted by that. The point is I can say, hey, put on your shoes. And then, somebody else later on could say, oh, he said to put on your shoes. Or it doesn't even have to be a verb of speaking. I can think about it. I can remember that I told you to put on your shoes. And those are forms of reported speech, right? But I'm reporting a command, not a statement or a question. We've learned in the past how to report statements and questions, but all these forms of reported speech behave slightly differently, which is annoying, I know. But it just means that we'll learn the rules for the indirect command, and they are even similar to indirect questions, at least. And in some ways, even to indirect statements. They do have things in common with each other, but they have some slight differences too. So let's find out what they are. So, first of all, the bit that they all have in common is that in the main clause, you have to have a verb that will report the speech. Some verb of thinking, speaking, or perceiving, but that's with indirect statements. With indirect questions and commands, those verbs become a little more specific. With an indirect command, it's definitely got to be a verb of ordering, commanding, requesting, something like that. So you're not going to have, totally random verbs of speaking. It's got to be something specific to the nature of the command. All right? But it doesn't have to be literally, I command. It doesn't have to be that. Verbs of request set up the same structure because the nature of what you're doing is the same, even if the verb you use is not as forceful as, like impero or mando, something that like or eubeo, something that definitely means order. All right? You can definitely ask people to do things, and grammatically it's the same function. All right? So that'll be the main clause. Then when you get to the indirect command itself, you have to have your word that starts the indirect command. For an indirect question, it was a question word, an interrogative of some kind. Well, for the indirect command, it's going to be ut, or ne if it's negative. It's ut when you're telling people to do, well, when you're saying that you told somebody to do something. If you are saying that you told somebody not to do something, then you're going to use ne. And then you're going to have your subjunctive verb, all right? All important stuff. Now, before I show you any actual examples, something that maybe is worth pointing out, the last video was on result clauses, and those also started with an ut. This is why in the last video I said make sure that you make a special place in your notes for words that get used for a lot of different things, and ut is one of them. It's because it can start different kinds of clauses. And when you translate them in English, it's not going to sound quite the same. When you start a result clause in English, you say that. And so it's tempting to think that you're translating your ut as that, and sort of you are, but don't think that ut simply means that, because when you use it with an indicative verb, it means when or as. And when you use it in an indirect command, you're actually going to translate your indirect command almost like it's an infinitive, because in English it is, but in Latin it's not. It's ut plus a subjunctive, or ne plus a subjunctive. Let me show you an example. All right? So here's an example where it says, the students asked me to turn on the lights in the room, or this says literally to light up the lights of the room. But yeah, the students asked me to turn on the lights in my room. Now, you might notice right away that I don't actually have the word me in here. This is actually being represented by my subjunctive verb, which is first person. A more literal way of thinking about the sentence would be, the students asked that I light up the lights in the room or of the room. right? So yeah, they asked that I do this. That's the most literal way to translate this. But of course, in colloquial English, that's not usually what we say. You can say that, and I think people would understand you. But usually in colloquial English, we say, the students asked me to turn on my lights. Also, I'm getting real tired of however many emails keep hitting my inbox. This time of day, I did not think emails were coming to my inbox. And now, like, this video is going to be all donked up with email noises. Y'all, give me a minute. Anyway, I'm going to go on and I'm going to upload this anyway. Point is, it would be perfectly acceptable to go ahead and translate this as the students asked me to turn on my lights, even though nothing in here is actually an infinitive, because it still means the same thing. We're still reporting a command, whether you say it the like more normal way or the kind of more old-fashioned way. But no matter what, you have to understand that the Latin is going to do it this way, that kind of more old-fashioned sounding way. The students asked that I turn on the lights in the room. Okay? Which of course I said no, because fluorescent lights are hideous. I mean, I turn them on for these videos just so the camera pick it up, but I promise you, these bad boys, they are going off. They're going off the second I'm done, because I hate them. I hate fluorescent lights. They're awful. Look at y'all, it's too late in the day. I'm getting distracted. Let me show you another example of the indirect command. All right? So one more thing to point out here. This is a great example of one in the secondary sequence. My main verb, which is my verb of request, was in the past. So I used an imperfect subjunctive here. But, just like with result clauses, I can have this in the primary sequence, and my subjunctive will always be either imperfect or present, because again, the indirect command can't happen before the main clause. If somebody was requesting something, then it wouldn't have already happened. So if I was in the primary sequence, I'm definitely going to have a present subjunctive like I have here with inciliant. And what this says is I always order my cats not to jump onto the kitchen table, right? So I use nay here because I'm ordering my cats not to do something. And I have it in the primary sequence because this is something that still happens. This is not something that happened yesterday or tomorrow. It's something that happens all the time. So present tense, continuing action, definitely. I always order my cats not to jump onto the kitchen table. All right? And this is indeed a present subjunctive. So, of course, they do it anyway, right? Isn't this always the way with indirect commands, right? People ask me to turn on the lights. I don't do it. I order my cats not to jump onto the table. They do it anyway, which, is why they say, why they just say to do those things which, it's possible for you to do, and not to get upset about everything else. All right, there you go. There's a handful of examples about indirect commands. I'm going to find out why my email inbox is blowing up, and I'm going to turn off these hideous, hideous fluorescent lights, and probably tomorrow I'm going to make what I think is going to be the last or second to last video for Latin 2 for the year. All right, bye guys.